Imagine carrying a bad basketball team to nearly 50 wins in a grueling 5-month season to then have to play the fully healthy Golden State Warriors in the first round of the playoffs. That was reality for Nikola Jokic this postseason. After him in the series, the next 5 best players were all on Golden State, the team which had the best defensive rating ever the first few months of the season. While Denver is far behind Golden State in skill though, they also just don't have the optionality to match up with this team very well. The ability to toggle between different lineups and styles. If Steve Kerr wants speed and athleticism, or a high IQ wing player with playmaking or passing chops, or just a big shooter like Nemanja Bjelica, he has all of that off of his bench. That type of depth is not just big time, but essential in the postseason if you don't have top-end star power. The Warriors' game plan from the very start was limiting Nikola's playmaking and neutralizing him by wearing him out like Phoenix did last year defensively. While he had gotten better on that end this year, there is simply nothing in basketball more tiring than trying to defend the Warriors' motion offense. Pull him out in space with the much quicker Steph Curry, who just so happens to be the best shooter ever with the perfect supporting cast to exhaust the Nuggets engine after an all-time carry job. All of those things boiled into a humiliating West Coast road trip last week that drew a ton of backlash from Jokic critics and Sixers fans. There's this unsensible mindset in the NBA community that if I want one player like Joel Embiid to win MVP, that I must diminish the candidacy of others without giving much objective review. But the reality is all three of Nikola, Joel, and Giannis have great MVP cases, which is what made Nikola's struggles early in the series, with reduced efficiency and lower assist totals, almost like the end of the world that people voted him for MVP, a regular season award. Part of reacting heavily to a 2-game playoff sample size is when you ignore 5 months worth of basketball, you realize you can get burned pretty darn quickly. It says a lot that Jokic underperforming is him leading all players this postseason in points per game with 31, 12, and 5 averages. In fact, the way many people will discredit him is by making fun of him for being the face of analytics, almost as if he had given the title to himself, which is an argument that may be more flimsy than Doc Rivers in closeout games. For one, him becoming the face of advanced analytics is at large part because no player in the NBA is more vital to his team's success. And Jokic can't control his teammates usually being terrible when he is resting, especially if MVP is an individual and not team award. But still, the vast majority of people who have Jokic for MVP don't care at all about the advanced numbers. The only advanced stats you'll regularly see with him are efficiency measures like true shooting, effective field goal percentage, or if people want to get fancy, player efficiency rating. But if that's too much and you prefer field goal percentage, the old-fashioned measure favors Mr. Jokic even more. Like, we can ignore the fact he's more efficient than Zion Williamson at the rim while averaging 27, 14, and 8 a night. So far in this year's playoffs, Nikola did indeed struggle in the first 2 games. But still, the counting stats match up really well with Giannis and Joel. So you may be saying to yourself, how about the eye test, John? While the Warriors' 3-guard lineup with Draymond and Wiggins went on big-time runs, embarrassing Nikola and his boys on both ends, Draymond Green shut him down at the Chase Center. But at the same time, Draymond in those games had a lot of things going his way. For one, Kevin Looney matches up with Joker to start each half to keep their best defender out of foul trouble early. And yet Draymond got himself in foul trouble during Game 3 and fouled out of Game 4 still. Jokic also just wasn't making anything from 3, which was the one regression in his game this season. Remember the Utah series where the dude shot 46% on a high volume of 3s, which probably still gives Rudy Gobert nightmares to this day? Well, this year he was only making 33% while starting this series 0 for 8 from deep. So with the defense not having to play him so tightly in the pick and pop and trailing 3-point shots, it limited his scoring arsenal. And so the Warriors focused on limiting his playmaking by not doubling and forcing him baseline to score in the post. And those double teams were really only going to come when the man being left wide open was a non-threat, like Aaron Gordon behind the arc for a movement 3, which definitely played in Golden State's favor as the Nuggets continued to struggle to make shots early on. And so the offense literally just became Nikola Jokic post possessions where Draymond was a brick wall not allowing anything to go through. His physicality and IQ, knowing many of Jokic's certain moves, with the length and foot speed getting into his spots, visibly frustrated Nikola. While on the other end of the floor, I will say Draymond and the Warriors have actually raised a really legitimate question about Nikola that's gonna need to be answered, ideally rather soon. Pretty simply, they're exploiting him for being a traditional defensive center. He's not agile enough to switch on to Steph Curry in space. The best rim protection is often perimeter defense, and the duality of Poole and Steph with the cohesion of the Warriors offense has made so many runaways Nikola cannot clean up. When it comes to pick and roll defense, Michael Malone is not going to drop back Jokic to give the Warriors offense open threes. The downside though of having him play high up or at the level of ball screens is that while he can cause some plays, getting his hands in passing lanes to cause some deflections, or taking away certain threes, he's susceptible to blow-bys. His conditioning has improved, but he's just never going to be the transformative center who can defend in a variety of ways. Against offenses like Golden State, you're going to need a Jaren Jackson Jr., Bam Adebayo, Robert Williams, or heck, even DeAndre Ayton, who aren't self-limited athletically. And the big question with Nikola is he's so important to his team that you really can't take him off the floor, but defensively, is he versatile enough to win a title as your center? Now on the bright side, if your center is going to be somewhat limited on defense, it's a pretty good thing that he's also the best offensive player in the game. And for Big Honey, what better way to respond to a disappointing road trip than with back-to-back 37-point performances? Just like that, he's averaging 31 a game, and while his assists are down, his cast wasn't hitting shots until Sunday night. Through the first 3 games, Will Barton in Game 1 was his only teammate to score over 18 points. Meanwhile, in just Game 3, the Warriors had 3 different players score 26 or more. Their second leading scorer in Aaron Gordon was 7 of 26 going into the second half of Game 3, before picking things up shortly after. On Sunday night though, Nikola did have legitimate help alongside him that was more than just 2 teammates stepping up. Not only enough, after narrowly losing in Game 3, they avoided the sweep. Monte Morris reigned in 5 trays with 24 points, while Austin Rivers had 5 steals in the second quarter, being a defensive pest. And Bones Highland erupted off the bench in the third, ending the game with 15 points and 7 assists in only 20 minutes. Aaron Gordon was physical with Jordan Poole defensively, while a legitimate factor on offense, with his cutting, drawing a number of fouls to get Draymond in foul trouble with a total of 13 free throws. The fact of the matter is, every single player is gonna need support to make it anywhere in the playoffs. Look at Joel Embiid in 2020. He averaged 28 and 14 during the year, but without Ben Simmons, the 76ers were heavily outmanned versus a Celtics team that also wasn't at full strength themselves. And so when Philly got swept, the discussion wasn't Joel Embiid is overrated, rather the team has a lot of work, they need Ben Simmons, and oh by the way, Joel Embiid can use this experience to refine elements of his game. And for Denver, while it is most likely they lose in 5 games and the series is going to end there, this thing can still end reasonably if they are creating turnovers. Steph maybe gets tired and has an off night in Game 5, and they're making shots. While Draymond's got the best of Cookie Monster in their first 2 matchups, and the last 2, Jokic has gotten the best of the former depoy, helping make this series somewhat competitive when the Nuggets should not even be here in the first place. And the 39 points from Monte Morris and Bones Highland with the defense from Austin Rivers give you hope, almost as if they're filling a void left behind from injuries to Jamal, MPJ, and PJ Dozier. With all that being said, those same people who were pretty quick to dismiss Nikola just last week are now suddenly really quiet. It's almost the beauty of overreacting to every single game that's fresh in our minds. The best player in the NBA, Kevin Durant, just got swept by Boston. And the real MVP, meanwhile, Joel Embiid is, a Scotty Barnes ankle injury away from being down 3-2 right now in the first round. Look, it is very easy to play this game. A lot of it is inflated and sometimes irrational. Is Joel Embiid overrated on defense because right now he's playing with a torn ligament in his thumb? Is Nikola Jokic a fraudulent MVP for taking a team that shouldn't have been in the playoffs into the playoffs and then losing in 5 or 6 games to a great contender in round 1? The dude has played with 0 all-stars in his career, and nobody talks about that literally at all. He's calling out Steve Kerr's game-winning ATOs in the sidelines while making the best offensive player versus defensive player matchup we've seen to this point this year. And now he's keeping Denver upright, giving their fans a smidgen of hope. So appreciate Nikola Jokic now. There's no guarantee we're going to see a player quite like him again.